Alright guys, Chapter 1, Assignment Day. In the city of Ember, the sky was always dark. The only light came from great flood lamps mounted on the buildings and at the top of poles in the middle of larger squares. When the lights were on, they cast a yellowish glow over the streets. People walking by threw long shadows that shortened and then stretched out again. When the lights were off, as they were between 9 at night and 6 in the morning, the city was so dark that people might as well have been wearing blindfolds. Sometimes darkness fell in the middle of the day. The city of Ember was old, and everything in it, including the power lines, was in need of repair. So now and then the lights would flicker and go out. These were terrible moments for the people of Ember. As they came to a halt in the middle of the street or stood stock still in their houses, afraid to move in the utter blackness, they were reminded of something they preferred not to think about, that someday the lights of the city might go out and never come back on. I'm going to pause there for a second. This reminds me of earlier in the year when we were talking about extreme settings, when we read All Summer in a Day. It really kind of makes me think of those things. The setting here is really important, and they're describing a pretty extreme setting. So if you want to jot down some information about why the setting's extreme, what sensory details the author's using to give you a really vivid picture in your mind about where these people live and what the city of Ember is like so far. All right, so we're on page 5, almost near the top. But most of the time, life proceeded as it always had. Grown people did their work, and younger people, until they reached the age of 12, went to school. On the last day of their final year, which was called Assignment Day, they were given jobs to do. The graduating students occupied room 8 of the Ember School. On Assignment Day of the year 241, this classroom, usually noisy first thing in the morning, was completely silent. All 24 students sat upright and still at the desks they had grown too big for. They were waiting. So a couple things I notice here. I see the year 241, so that makes me think when they started the city of Ember, maybe it was year 0. I don't know, something to pay attention to as I read. Maybe I'll find more information. Also, there were 24 students in this grade, and that they graduate at age 12, which is different from what we'd be used to in our society, going all the way through high school and graduating around 18. So the desks were arranged in 4 rows of 6, one behind the other. In the last row sat a slender girl named Lena Mayfleet. She was winding a strand of her long dark hair around her finger, winding and unwinding it again and again. Sometimes she plucked at a thread on her ragged cape or bent over to pull her socks, which were loose and tended to slide down around her ankles. One of her feet tapped the floor softly. In the second row was a boy named Dune Harrow. He sat with his shoulders hunched, his eyes squeezed shut in concentration, and his hands clasped tightly together. His hair looked rumpled, as if he hadn't combed it for a while. He had dark, thick eyebrows, which made him look serious at the best of times, and when he was anxious or angry, came together to form a straight line across his forehead. His brown corduroy jacket was so old that its ridges had flattened out. Both the girl and the boy were making urgent wishes. Dune's wish was very specific. He repeated it over and over again, his lips moving slightly as if he could make it come true by saying it 1,000 times. Lena was making her wish in pictures rather than words. In her mind's eye, she saw herself running through the streets of the city in a red jacket. She made this picture as bright and real as she could. So I'm wondering, I wonder what that red jacket means. Must be some sort of job that the assignment would give you a red jacket. Curious, let's read and find out. Lena looked up and gazed around the schoolroom. She said a silent goodbye to everything that had been familiar for so long. Goodbye to the map of the city of Ember and its scarred wooden frame, and the cabinet whose shelves held the book of numbers, the book of letters, and the book of the city of Ember. Goodbye to the cabinet drawers labeled new paper and old paper. Goodbye to the 3 electric lights in the ceiling that seemed always, no matter where you sat, to cast a shadow on your head over the page you were writing, a shadow of your head over the page you were writing on. And goodbye to their teacher, Miss Thorne, who had finished her last day of school speech, wished them luck in their lives they were about to begin. Now, having run out of things to say, she was standing at her desk with her frayed shawl clasped around her shoulders. And still the mayor, the guest of honor, had not arrived. Someone's foot scraped back and forth on the floor. Miss Thorne sighed. Then the door rattled open. and the mayor walked in. He looked annoyed, as though they were the ones who were late. "Welcome, Mayor Cole," said Miss Thorne. She held out her hand to him. The mayor made his mouth into a smile. "Miss Thorne," he said, enfolding her hand. "Greetings, another year." The mayor was a vast, heavy man, so big in the middle that his arms looked small and dangling. In one hand he held a little cloth bag. He lumbered to the front of the room and faced the students. His gray, drooping face appeared to be made of something stiffer than ordinary skin. It rarely moved except for making the smile that was on it now. "Young people of the highest class," the mayor began. He stopped and scanned the room for several moments. His eyes seemed to look out from far back inside his head. He nodded slowly. "Assignment day now, isn't it?" "Yes. First we get our education, then we serve our city." Again his eyes moved back and forth along the rows of students, and again he nodded, as if someone had confirmed what he'd said. He put the little bag on Miss Thorne's desk and rested his hand on it. "What will that service be, eh? Perhaps you're wondering." He did his smile again, and his heavy cheeks folded like drapes. Lena's hands were cold. She wrapped her cape around her and pressed her hands between her knees. "Please hurry, Mr. Mayor," she said silently. "Please just let us choose and get it over with." Dune, in his mind, was saying the same thing, only he didn't say please. "Something to remember," the mayor said, holding up one finger. "Job you draw today is for 3 years. Then, evaluation. Are you good at your job? Fine, you may keep it. Are you unsatisfactory? Is there a greater need elsewhere? You will be reassigned. It is extremely important," he said, jabbing his finger at the class, "for all work of Ember to be done, to be properly done." He picked up the bag and pulled open the drawstring. "So, let us begin. Simple procedure. Come up one at a time. Reach into this bag. Take one slip of paper. Read it out loud." He smiled and nodded. The flesh under his chin bulged in and out. "Who cares to be first?" No one moved. Lena stared down at the top of her desk. There was a long silence. Then Lizzie Biscoe, one of Lena's best friends, sprang to her feet. "I would like to be first," she said in her breathless high voice. "Good. Walk forward." Lizzie went to stand before the mayor. Because of her orange hair, she looked like a bright spark next to him. Excuse me. "Now choose." The mayor held out the bag with one hand and put the other behind his back, as if to show he would not interfere. Lizzie reached into the bag and withdrew a tightly folded square of paper. She unfolded it carefully. Lena couldn't see the look on Lizzie's face, but she could hear the disappointment in her voice as she read out loud, "Supply Depot Clerk." "Very good," said the mayor. "A vital job." Lizzie trudged back to her desk. Lena smiled at her, but Lizzie made a sour face. Supply Depot Clerk wasn't a bad job, but it was a dull one. The Supply Depot clerk sat behind a long counter, took orders from the storekeepers of Ember, and sent the carriers down to bring up what was wanted from the vast network of storerooms beneath Ember streets. The storerooms held supplies of every kind: canned food, clothes, furniture, blankets, light bulbs, medicine, pots and pans, reams of paper, soap, more light bulbs, everything the people of Ember could possibly need. The clerks sat at their ledger books all day, recording the orders that came in and goods that went out. Lizzie didn't like to sit still. She would have been better suited to something else, Lena thought. Messenger, maybe? The job Lena wanted for herself. Messengers ran through the city all day long, going everywhere, seeing everything. So, have we found out what it is that Lena hopes that she is assigned to? Yes, messenger. And we can infer that messengers must wear red coats or red jackets, like we read before, that she pictured in her mind. "Next," said the mayor. This time 2 people stood up at once, Orley Gordon and Chet Nome. Orley quickly sat down again, and Chet approached the mayor. "Choose, young man," the mayor said. Chet chose. He unfolded his scrap of paper. "Electrician's helper," he read, and his wide face broke into a smile. Lena heard someone take a quick breath. She looked over to see June pressing a hand against his mouth. You never knew each year exactly which jobs would be offered. Some years there were several good jobs, like greenhouse helper, timekeeper's assistant, or messenger, and no bad jobs at all. Other years, jobs like pipeworks laborer, trash sifter, and mold scraper were mixed in. Excuse me. But there would always be at least 1 or 2 jobs for electrician's helper. Fixing the electricity was the most important job in Ember, and more people worked at it than anything else. Orly Gordon was next. She got the job of building repair assistant, which was a good job for Orly. She was a strong girl and liked hard work. Vindy Chance was made a greenhouse helper. She gave Lena a big grin as she went back to her seat. She'll get to work with Clary, Lena thought. Lucky. So far, no one had picked a really bad job. Perhaps this time there would be no bad jobs at all. The idea gave her courage. Besides, she had reached the point where the suspense was giving her a stomach ache. So as Vindy sat down, even before the mayor could say next, she stood up and stepped forward. The little bag was made of faded green material, gathered at the top with a black string. Lena hesitated a moment, then put her hand inside and fingered the bits of paper. Feeling as if she was stepping off a high building, she picked one. So just think about that imagery that the author is creating when he says that, feeling as if she were stepping off a high building. How would you feel if you were stepping off the ledge of a high building? So those are the kinds of feelings that she had when she was picking this job. She unfolded it. The words were written in black ink, in small, careful printing. Pipeworks laborer, they said. She stared at them. Out loud, please, the mayor said. Pipeworks laborer, Lena said in a choked whisper. Louder, said the mayor. Pipeworks laborer, Lena said again, her voice loud and cracked. There was a sigh of sympathy from the class. Keeping her eyes on the floor, Lena went back to her desk and sat down. Pipeworks laborers worked below the storerooms in the deep labyrinth of tunnels that contained Ember's water and sewer pipes. They spent their days stopping up leaks and replacing pipe joints. It was wet, cold work. It could even be dangerous. A swift underground river ran through the pipeworks, and every now and then someone fell into it and was lost. People were lost occasionally in the tunnels too, if they strayed too far. Excuse me. Lena stared miserably down at a letter B someone had scratched into her desktop long ago. I'm going to pause to get some water, and I'm going to come right back.